Elk seizoen maken we een selectie uit de aankondigingen van nieuw werk van zowel binnen- als buitenlandse kunstenaars. We gieten elke aankondiging in een beeld. Al die beelden samen worden een boek. Met dat boek trokken we maanden geleden naar de kunstenaars van wie nieuw werk in het boek wordt aangekondigd. We troffen hen aan in volle voorbereiding en vroegen hen welk werk van welke collega's hen intrigeert. De Canvasconnetie, vandaag met Michael Wolf. Michael Wolf is een Duits fotograaf. Hij werkte jarenlang als fotojournalist voor het Duitse weekblad Stern. Midden jaren 90 verhuist hij naar Hongkong. Een stad die hem nu, na 20 jaar, nog altijd blijft inspireren. In 2005 krijgt Michael Wolf met zijn Architecture of Density internationale bekendheid. Wij zochten hem op in Hongkong.
As a photojournalist, I was always focused on people. And when I was doing my Hong Kong project, I basically wanted to tell a story using the objects and what the objects reveal. One of the things which always interest me are vernacular culture. And in Hong Kong, behind all these buildings, you have back alleys. And in these back alleys, there's a wealth of material to photograph because all the workmen, all the people who work in the restaurants and work in the buildings, they all leave their things in these back alleys. We're in Tsim Sha Tsui now. It's quite a noisy and loud area, but as soon as you get into the back alleys, you'll see it's a very different environment. Follow me, I'm going to take you on a tour of some of my favorite back alleys. See, this is very typical for Hong Kong. Because there's so little storage space. Space is a valuable commodity. A lot of people store their things outside in the back alleys, and so they don't get wet, they cover them. Okay, let's go on. Now, if you look straight ahead, at the end of this alley, you'll see something wonderful. In these back alleys, I discovered a lot of different topics. One of them was, for instance, mops. I started just photographing them, and in the end, I think I have over 100 different ways of drawing mops. Hong Kong is a very safe place with very little crime and very little vandalism. Because in any other city, anything you leave out that way, which is so carefully construed, you could be sure within 6 hours someone's going to come along and knock it down. I'm so happy when I see this, when I find installations like this. This is a very special one. Oh, here's another mop. Wow. Here's a cross back alley. They cross. So I'll go down this way. This is one you really have to see. It's just a beauty. This is a Hong Kong bastard chair. They were made by working people who didn't have art in mind. But I really saw the beauty in it. I was fascinated by it. And I continued working on the bastard chairs. The Chinese are extremely resourceful. They never throw anything away. In the West, in Europe especially, as soon as something breaks, you throw it away and buy a new thing, and that doesn't happen in China. Also, that the Chinese don't care about the way things look, really. They didn't care if something is repaired and you can see how it's repaired. The main thing is that it works. So here we have an example of a bastard chair. So instead of throwing it out, they took the chair where the base was broken off, they put it into a bucket of detergent and they filled concrete in it and let it harden. So there you go, you have a chair which suddenly works again. Ah, very nice, very nice. You have the circle, you have the triangle, you have the diagonals. It's a really nice installation. There we go. For me, these back alleys are so unique to Hong Kong that I've always thought it would be wonderful to have the back alleys of Hong Kong declared a World Heritage Site. Coming to Hong Kong in 1994 really was a crucial event in my life. I think sometimes there are these events which happen where two things fit extremely well together. This visual sensory excitement. No matter where I went, no matter what I did, I was constantly as if I were under electricity. Here's someone very important for me, William Eggleston. When I was studying in Essen from 1972 to 76, I remember I bought William Eggleston's guide. That was a catalog of his show at the MoMA. It has that tricycle on the cover. But what fascinated me about Eggleston is that he photographed in color, but the color wasn't that important for me. It was the subject matter, because I had known mainly photojournalism, and here comes someone who photographs totally mundane things. What it looks like underneath a bed, a bare light bulb hanging from a red ceiling. They were things which before I would have never thought would have been worth photographing. These moments are always extremely important for me in my career, where you suddenly wake up to something, when you suddenly realize you become aware of something which you weren't aware of before. This is a typical Eggleston photograph. If you think about that, in the 70s, it was unheard of. Who would photograph a chain and a piece of cardboard next to a telephone pole? These are totally everyday things. Or just photographing into a freezer. Who would think photographing into a freezer is worth a picture? But it is, of course, because it tells you a lot about the person who the freezer belongs to. Frank Lloyd Wright. I came into contact with him very early in my life because he built a civic center in Marin County in California. I lived in Berkeley for 7 or 8 years, and we would go up the coast to spend the holidays. And every time we went up there, I remember my father pointing out of the car window and said, "Mike, look, there's the Frank Lloyd Wright building." It's sort of in no context. It's built right in the middle of nowhere. And as an 8 or 9-year-old, for me, it was the first contact I had really with something very contemporary. And it almost looked like a spaceship had come down. I moved from Germany to the United States in the 60s. Which was the best time to be there. The whole student movement, the free speech movement started there, and that's where I got my earliest experiences in photography. There were huge demonstrations with tear gas and police. The first image I ever had published was taken then. I had photographed a policeman standing in a wall of other policemen. I had taken a portrait of him in black and white, and it was very grainy. And a friend of my father's, she said, "Oh, I'll submit it to San Francisco Camera," which was quite a good photographic journal. I was quite proud as a young boy. Joseph Beuys. Joseph Beuys was really one of the first people who opened my eyes to the wonder that art can be, or the directions, how shall I explain it? Just that there's no limit to your imagination. In 1974, he did a performance piece. And it was a brilliant piece. He went to America, but the idea was that he doesn't touch the ground in America. He just gets brought into the gallery where there's a cage with a coyote. He meets this coyote for a period of 8 hours. And then he's brought back out to the airplane, but always on a hospital bed, so he doesn't touch the floor. And I remember seeing this performance on film, and it taught me how wonderful art can be. This wonderful, wonderful, crazy performance. Garry Johansen. He's a photographer, a Swedish photographer. I knew him through his books, and I was bowled over by them because the way the pictures are composed, the composition of the pictures are so intelligently thought out. Let me see, I have a book of his actually. This is called Deutschland. So what fascinated me was the way he composes space. You can see that every single picture, every single plane is 100% thought about, where things intersect. So this pole doesn't cover this building, but he leaves a very small space in between. And you can see with every one of his pictures, the composition is absolutely stunning. This is cut off, and then this piece of road is cut. So you have this incredible tension in the composition. And I've never, ever encountered a work where the surfaces and the planes are so well and so thoughtfully composed. If you moved the camera 1 millimeter, the picture would change. You know, for instance, here, this little bush doesn't intersect with the tree in the foreground. And this cut-off tree exactly touches that, but it doesn't overlap. And these are all conscious decisions. This is a very typical German post-war house where the old windows have been taken out, they're out of plastic, you know, the typical garage. So it says a lot about Germany as well. A bit depressing. I find the book depressing, you know, that's one of the reasons I left Germany, because it looked like this. You see, he's an outsider coming to Germany, and it's the same advantage that I have when I came to Hong Kong. The buildings I photographed have been here, they were here long before I came to Hong Kong. Anyone could have photographed them here. Any local photographer could have taken architecture of density because they're right in front of everyone's eyes. But if you're too close to something, you don't notice it. You take it for granted. Okay, here we have the book. This is the book 100 by 100. But this was an interesting housing estate. It was Hong Kong's first public housing estate, built in 1954. Each room was 10 square meters. Unfortunately, it's been torn down in 2007, I think, and I took the photographs in April of 2006. My idea was to document as many rooms as possible. So I just put my camera into the doorway, and I decided very early to always put the camera in the same position, and I asked the person to sit in the middle of the room on a chair or on the bed and to look neutral. I didn't want them laughing, and I didn't want them looking sad. I wanted them to look more or less neutral. In the end, it's not so much about the people, it's more about a sociological project. Because it's always the same floor plan, it's interesting to see what all the rooms have in common. A refrigerator, a fan, a TV, a calendar. What fascinates me about Hong Kong is how people survive or how people make do with such little space. And you can see it, of course, in these interiors, the whole plastic bag culture, how everything has to be foldable that you can put under the bed, so everything is really, every space is used. I think Hong Kong had invented IKEA before IKEA came into being. What struck me the most was the answers to the question, why do you like living here? And almost everyone said, because of our community. If we get sick, we have someone who will go shopping for us or someone will look in on us. For me, it was quite an important experience because it showed me that space ultimately isn't that important, but your community is important. But if you ask more and you try to dig a bit deeper, of course, everyone would like to live in his own house. But it's simply impossible to do that in Hong Kong. And if you think about it too much, you get depressed. So they're extremely good at adapting to their situation. You sort of have to make do with the cards that you're dealt and make the best of it. And that's what Hong Kong is extremely good at. This building where I am in is the Galerie industrial building. I think it has over 400 units, and in every unit you have a different small business. Across from my units, there are 2 units with a dried goods. Since about 5 or 6 years, more and more creative people have been moving into these industrial buildings because the rent is quite reasonable. The space like this, I couldn't afford it. But in a factory building, it's quite reasonable. They're ideal as studios. The ceilings are very high. You have big elevators, so you can bring big things up and down. There's also a very nice rooftop here, actually. Why don't we go up on the roof? It's quite nice up there. We can go and look at the surroundings. Okay, so now let's see where we want to go. Okay, I think you should get a bit closer because you need to photograph a wide-angle shot of this whole section of Taiwan because it gives you a very good feeling of the density. In my photograph, it's just a very tiny crop and you have no horizon and no sky. If you want to zoom in, more, almost there. The only thing which is wrong is if you see in the left here, there's a bit of green. So move it over a bit, yes, perfect. And raise it a bit, a little bit, there, exactly. So that's a Michael Wolff. The aspect ratio is a bit different. This is 9:12 and mine is 3:4, but it's still, I would say this is very close to a Michael Wolff architecture of density shot. Oh, that's beautiful. That's gonna be a real nice shot. That's it. Perfect. Nine Inch Nails. They sort of passed me by. And then a few years ago, I read a fascinating profile on Trent Reznor, the father of the Nine Inch Nails.
Look what you have disturbed. Why all the change of heart? You need to play your part.
What I found interesting is his personal history. He was a heroin addict, cocaine addict, alcoholic, had huge personal difficulties, and he was capable of creating something out of this suffering. He was an incredible songwriter. I don't cry very often. One of the few times I really cried was when I heard Johnny Cash singing Hurt, which is a Trent Reznor song. It's one of the later recordings, only Johnny Cash with his guitar, I think a year before he died, or maybe even 6 months. It was a time when Johnny Cash was in tremendous pain.
I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. The needle tears a hole, the old familiar sting. Try to kill it all away, but I remember everything. What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away in the end, and you could have it all. My empire of dirt, I will let you down. I will make you hurt.
Martin Parr. Wonderful. I had a chance to meet him personally last year in November. He came to Hong Kong to photograph, and he came by the studio. It was for me very interesting because I've always admired his work, especially his early work. He fits into a tradition of British satirical photography, and it's a very humorous way of looking at the world. It's almost a caricature, especially his later work, which is in color. It's sort of holding up a mirror to society. This is the early black and white work. You know, it's a very nice picture of 4 ladies taking a walk and looking at the cow, but it's humorous. Here, also the scenes at the beach. The British are famous for the way they use the beaches, that they often keep their clothes on. It's, I really like these, yeah, making a bit of fun of them. The question is, how important is it to have sympathy for the people you photograph? I'm often asked that about my project, Tokyo Compression. A lot of people have talked about my work in the context of voyeurism, because many of the people are sleeping, meaning they don't know they're being photographed, and have questioned the morality. Every day I would witness at least 20 or 30 scenes like that of people in the train, jammed against the window. And the crucial thing here was that these people couldn't avoid me, because they were coming in from the other side and they were jammed so close to the opposite end of the compartment that they couldn't get away. So here, this woman, for instance, she lifted up her hands to hide from me. I was often asked, you know, did you ask for permission? How could you photograph people like that? It's demeaning, you know, you're making fun of them. And I thought about it a lot. And in the end, I don't think I'm making fun of these people. It's not about a satire, it's about the human condition, I find. These are victims. And they're not victims of my camera, they're victims of contemporary megacity life. Louise Bourgeois Bourgeois. I always knew her spiders. I'd seen those quite often, but I was not familiar with her work until last year I saw a retrospective in Avignon. I realized this woman was tremendously creative, just a wonderful artist, and this incredible discovery for me. So she worked in many different areas, and I just find it interesting when artists do that. She also uses collages, and she used pieces of cloth to combine and create images. So there are many different media in that exhibition. Her work is a lot about gender and about the relationships between men and women. So it's deeply personal and reflects her experiences as a woman and her experiences that she had in her childhood. There was one work which I found extremely powerful. It was an installation, and you had to go in to this metal enclosure out of very rough metal. And the first thing you saw was this low metal bed, and there was a figure, I think of a man, stretched almost like a bed of torture. And then when you turned to the left, there was a huge saw, which butchers use to saw frozen meat. It was horrifying. It was extremely powerful. I remember going in there and just, you know, having an extreme reaction to what I saw. And I really like that kind of art, where I have a physical reaction to. When I went out through the gift shop, I discovered a portfolio. The photographer's name is Brigitte Cornand. There are pictures of Louise taken shortly before her death, I think. I just find them marvelous because this woman was working until the last week before she died. It's always a fear that I have that at some point I won't have any ideas, or that my mind will stop working and I won't feel inspired by things. I just feel very lucky to have landed here in Hong Kong. Sometimes one has the good fortune of just ending somewhere where there's this extremely productive connection, and Hong Kong turned out to be that place. I really love the city. The city has given me my career, more or less. I think I would have never found so much inspiration somewhere else. It was just a perfect marriage. I feel very fortunate, and I'm very grateful to Hong Kong in that sense.
God.